Feedback is a gift. And if you can decide in the moment that you're getting feedback, whether you want to use it to get better or you want to use it to get mad, I really do think about that a lot. And I think it's been a real core value of my approach as an employee, but also as a leader. How do I continue to give feedback to people? How do I receive feedback? How do I think about incorporating that feedback to continue to make myself better, my team better, my organization better?
That was Apryl Childs-Potter, president of the Nashville Healthcare Council, who is working together with industry leaders to further establish Nashville's position as the Center for Healthcare Innovation. My name is Suzanne Reed, LVMC's Chief Marketing Officer and your host for Make It Count. In this episode, Apryl shares her love of a good playlist and where she hopes to be in retirement. She also shares NHCC's major initiative to bring Nashville even more exposure through sessions, which just happened, and her collaborative spirit that has cultivated in continuing to raise the bar for our region. Listen in to hear how leaders like Apryl create and invite change. Welcome, Apryl. I'm so excited to have you on our show today.
Oh, my goodness. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's exciting to be here with you this morning.
I always start each podcast with the same question that people kind of look at me a little cockeyed about. 3 months from retirement for Apryl, which I know is a ways away for you. But what would those 3 months look like right before you retired?
It's hard for me to think about retirement for a couple reasons. One is that I think none of us realizes that we're getting older until something happens where, you get out of bed in the morning and you injure yourself doing basic tasks, which is starting to happen. So I should start thinking about this question probably a little more. My vision has always been that I would retire to the mountains with my husband and I would hike and really spend time in nature. I've been a city dweller my whole career. And so that sort of getting back to nature, sort of to my upbringing has been my priority. So I think if I was 3 months away from that, I would be really diligent around thinking about what things I could impart to my team. I do see as I get older and more senior in my career how important generational lessons are.
I like that.
Well, and sometimes people maybe don't want to receive that, but I think one of the benefits of nearing retirement, I guess, would be you can tell people whether they like it or not, right?
That's right.
So, just try to share wisdom and some lessons learned. I think that's really important.
I love that. And that leadership, I think that's a common theme we hear from great leaders always want to impart and leave behind. So while you have your vision of that different Apryl after, you also are thinking, what can I do to leave this place better, right?
I think that's important. The other thing I would say is also asking questions of earlier generations. I listened to an audiobook a couple of years ago, and the person was talking about every year on his birthday, he adds to the list of things that he thinks are important. And one of those things was asking people what music they're listening to that are of a younger generation, because you always want to stay current. And so I think that's another thing going into retirement. I try to get a good playlist from the young people, so I sort of have some finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Playlist, very important for retirement, right? Very important. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about some very exciting things. You've come to the Nashville Healthcare Council. Tell us a little bit about that journey here and how that's been. And it's been, 2 years?
Almost 2.5.
Okay.
2.25. I still like to say I'm new. I don't know how much more runway I get on that. So I came into this role just over 2 years ago. I was recruited into this role. I started my career in the medical device industry and marketing, and I always joke that that's relatively irrelevant in Nashville's healthcare ecosystem. We have a little bit of medical device, but not quite as much. But I'd spent the last 4 years prior to this role in economic development and really working on how do regions think about their economy and how do they grow. And Nashville's healthcare industry is really a standard bearer in that economic. We think about the healthcare industry and sort of the impact on patients, but the healthcare industry's growth in Nashville is really the reason for so many of these cranes and buildings and the explosive growth that's happened across Middle Tennessee. And so the opportunity to come in to an organization that's been really at the forefront of helping drive that growth, or almost 30-year-old organization. So getting to be part of what do the next 30 years look like? How do you shape growth, and how do you create a culture that continues to value that collaboration that's helped build that growth in healthcare here? How do you get to think about what that next couple of decades looks like? And that was a really exciting opportunity for me. I think Nashville's been a leader in so many ways in the healthcare industry, particularly. I think such a good model for business leadership and how executives that sit at the helm of these huge corporations still come together quarterly and talk about what is required to make their community a sustainable place for healthcare companies and talent and investment to continue to thrive. I just had a board meeting, and it's really remarkable with everything that's going on and the busy schedules of these executives that these CEOs take time to come together and talk about the challenges, to share information and ideas. It's really just an incredible environment. And I think how Nashville can continue to take that ethos. We like to say now, how are we taking Nashville to the world? So that sort of ethos of collaboration, how are we as an organization helping catalyze that as a way of doing business across healthcare?
What I love about what you're saying is you're taking an organization that you would, just like an LBMC that's been around for 40 years, but you realize there's that evolution for the next, right?
Sure.
And it's so Nashville that you're thinking, how can we help the rest by what we've done in Nashville? And to your point, the fact that the leaders are still engaged and they're still willing to look at that. So new to Nashville, 2.5 years. When you came into Nashville, obviously we're here to kind of with the healthcare, but what else were you thinking about as far as Nashville and the opportunities that are here? Like, what else struck you as you hit this market?
Oh, goodness. So it's really interesting. I had lived in Memphis prior to this, and you'd think that's only 3 hours away. I just didn't spend a lot of time in Nashville. So I think what struck me when I came in was just how much growth has truly happened. I sort of knew about it from a data perspective, but seeing the number of cranes in the sky, seeing the number of buildings that had gone up was really striking to me. I think the first week that I was here, Ralph Schultz at the Chamber of Commerce told me that we had 55 cranes in the sky in Metro Nashville. And
Wow.
that same week, there were 62 cranes in the sky in Metro LA.
Wow.
So just if you think about the size difference, Nashville is punching well above its weight in growth. So that was something that struck me immediately, was just this sort of growth that was happening and the amount of business transactions that happen here. I think it's just absolutely incredible. The first year I commuted, and so I was renting an apartment downtown, and most of the people that were in my apartment building were people who didn't live in Nashville full time but flew in to do business. And I think that's just an incredible testament to what a cosmopolitan major metro city Nashville's becoming.
Isn't that great that you see that? But interesting that you were just 3 hours away.
Had no idea.
And had no idea. But kind of the Nashville continues to be one of the best kept secrets, right? We laugh about that.
Well,
we do chuckle about that a little bit.
I think even during COVID, so much of that accelerated. And so I have conversations with people who've been in Nashville for a while, but maybe live further out from the city proper, who are just starting to realize, oh, look at Germantown. Look at what's happening on the East Bank. If you're not, coming into the city on a regular basis, you may not realize how much growth is really happening.
Yeah.
Unless you're sitting in traffic.
There you go. That's exactly right. Yeah. Let's now look back and as a leader, talk about kind of maybe those first roles, first jobs, and what would be some coaching or wisdom that you would give your young self now?
I do think about this a lot. We have a lot of folks on our team at the council who are earlier in their career. And so I think about this a lot. What would I tell myself? I think the more senior I get in my own career, the more I recognize that change is absolutely inevitable. I think early in my career, I was so focused on figuring out the formula. What are the things I need to do that are going to propel me forward? What are these sort of steps that I have to take? And what I recognize looking back is that what's most important is preparing yourself to be open to change and to be open to feedback and to be open to recognizing what's actually happening around you in real time. I think it's really easy to get focused on a long-term goal, whether that's your personal career or how much money you want to make or what title you want to have or what company you want to work for. And you sort of lose sight of all the great learning and the things that are happening in the now. And so I think being able to be in the now is really important. And then that other piece is being aware that things are constantly evolving and changing. So you should really be evaluating, even what those long-term goals are, probably earlier on. I would love to have a time machine and go back to 24-year-old Apryl and maybe give her some of that wisdom.
I think we all would, right?
Sure.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, what individuals have said, but I think all of it really is encompassed in that continual learning, right? And just know that everything's not an up trajectory, and that the more prepared and more, I guess the new word is agile, the more flexible you'll be in your career path, right? As it takes you kind of forward.
A lot of my early career, I had some good mentors early on. And so I think that's a benefit that I did have in my career. And someone told me very early on in my career, maybe I'd gotten a bad review or some bad feedback, but that feedback is a gift. And if you can decide in the moment that you're getting feedback, whether you want to use it to get better or you want to use it to get mad,
right?
I really do think about that a lot. And I think it's been a real core value of my approach as an employee, but also as a leader. How do I continue to give feedback to people? How do I receive feedback? How do I think about incorporating that feedback to continue to make myself better, my team better, my organization better?
That's a great words of wisdom for all of us, at no matter what stage that you're at. What do you think leaders who aren't doing it right, what are they getting wrong? What are they missing?
Well, I hate to think anybody's not getting it right, because I think the reality is we're all getting it shades of right and wrong all the time. I think the post-COVID world is so different. Becoming an adult, becoming a grown-up, which I think I'm still doing,
Yes.
is, I think, realizing that there is this constant change. And so the irony of being a leader is that you were sort of brought up in a culture and a way of doing business that probably doesn't look the same at all by the time you get in that leadership seat. So you've got to be able to adapt and change. I think recognizing that a lot of leadership is also about making unpopular decisions that you know or you believe will benefit the organization in the long run. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she started a new school this year, and she's going to her first sleepover tonight. And as she was going out the door, I was saying, be on your best behavior. I want her to take with her those sort of family norms and manners. Of course, as a parent, you want to see your child do in rooms that you're not in.
Right.
And I think about that in the way that I think about leadership too. So much of it is trying to create a framework for how you think about the organization and how you think about the direction and the strategy of where you want to go, and how you can teach your team to think about things in that way, to have that framework so that they're able to make decisions and do things in a way, the cultural norms, the core values that you establish, all those things that you're trying to really teach your team almost in the same way you teach your family, to the way you want them to be and the way you want them to make decisions, so that they can be good stewards of the organization even when you're not in the room. And I think about that a lot from a leadership perspective. How are we teaching the team, and how are we getting the team to think about things? So as a leader, I don't think other leaders get that wrong. I think it's just really hard to let go of making all those decisions and trusting that whether it's when your kid goes to the sleepover or when your team is in a room that you're not in and they're making decisions, that they can do that in a way that makes sense as long as you've oriented them towards the framework of the business and the strategy and the way that you think about it.
Some other people might call it guardrails.
Guardrails, absolutely.
Or boundaries, right? And I do think as humans, we all need those, right? And it just helps for better teamwork, if you will, right? That structure. I like that. LBMC's 40 years, and we've talked a lot about being 40 years old and what that's kind of meant, and that legacy and what the enterprise has created. What do you want Apryl's legacy to be when she rides on that trail or heads on that trail
when I head off into the sunset
with your playlist? What do you want
with
that
my
legacy?
iPod on my mountain, mountain hike? Oh, goodness. A lot of leadership training is about what's your North Star? What is it that what guides sort of your decision-making and your sort of ethos as a person? And I've always kind of struggled with that, sort of that exercise. What is that? And so I've spent a lot of time on that in the last year. And I think what I've distilled that down to is that I love to help people and organizations realize their potential. I can be, whether it's, coming into an organization and seeing what's maybe not happening yet that's possible, or having a team member that you see can do more, can take on more, can continue to grow and try to cultivate that, or even seeing an industry like healthcare, for example, that certainly has a big runway of potential improvement, potential opportunity for new thinking and innovation. I love being part of helping catalyze that kind of development, whether it's in a person or an organization or even in an industry. And so I think as I'm riding off into the sunset or I'm traveling with my iPod on my mountain hike in retirement, I hope that people that I've worked with and organizations that I've led have that thumbprint from my leadership of continuing to see that potential and finding ways to sort of tease it out and take bold steps forward to make that potential into a reality.
That's a good legacy.
The thing that I think I do well is maybe see that potential that someone else might not see. It's a very different story to get others to start to see it. And I think that's the real area where I try to do work as a leader is how can I continue to do a better job of communicating the potential I see to others so that they can get excited about it as well.
I think that's great. What are you excited about in Nashville? You've talked about what you're currently doing. You've talked about what moving here, but anything else that excites you?
Oh my goodness. So my husband and I love live music. And I've said for the past 2 years, and I'm always this way at the beginning of a role, right? I've been really focused on work. And so I have been working in Nashville, but I haven't really been living in Nashville.
Yeah.
So we're just dipping our toe into the culture here. I think the music scene is really incredible. Everybody plays here. So pretty excited about leaning into that a little bit more. The culinary scene here is really great. We're already finding some favorite restaurants, and so that's pretty exciting. I think the other piece is that I really didn't recognize the sort of the outdoor amenities of Nashville and the metro Nashville area. So as a family that really loves to hike and get in the kayak and do things like that, there's so much opportunity to take advantage of those natural resources here. And I'm really looking forward to doing more of that.
Well, I love that. And that sounds like those are great things for you to do as you ponder that way far off retirement.
Yes.
Ending on that, leadership, as you've talked a lot about through this entire podcast, is really about helping others get excited about your vision or your roadmap or the ecosystem or the framework that you're putting in. And you've talked a lot about how important that is. So talk a little bit about your vision around sessions.
I have to say, I get a lot of benefit in my job. I got to inherit a really well-respected organization. My predecessors had done an incredible job of continuing to cultivate this ecosystem and grow the footprint of Nashville's healthcare ecosystem and those that were involved with the council. When I came in, the organization had spent 3 or 4 years developing a strategy around a national conference. The thinking that was really driven by our leadership was there are big healthcare conferences from a finance and innovation perspective that happen on the coast every year. And Nashville as a healthcare capital really should own a conference and have a conference here that's really brand agnostic. And that was really important to the leaders. And what I mean by that is those conferences are typically branded by one entity.
Right.
And in the typical Nashville business way, the vision was let's have a conference that the council can own and convene as a champion of the ecosystem that can be a big tent where all of the players in healthcare can come together and really innovate and get business done. And so the blueprint for that was really well established when I came in. My job was just to make it happen. I came in May of 2022. There was a vision in place for putting this conference together, and there was a timeline. I just had to figure out how to make it happen. And fortunately, we have a really great team, not only the volunteer leadership within the council, but the team, our staff, was really committed to helping bring that vision to life. So in year one, very candidly had no idea what we were doing. But we found a venue that was available, which is tough to do in Nashville.
Yes, it is.
On short notice. And we started forming the conference. The first thing we had to do was figure out what to call it. When I came in, it had a sort of code name of TBD Nashville Conference. And so we worked with a firm to help think about what is a name to brand this conference that will capture the essence of what we're trying to do, really bring people together to collaborate, but also really underline the sort of Nashville-ness of this conference. And so we came up with the Nashville Healthcare Sessions branding, which I thought was really well done in a couple ways. One is that it captures that sort of musical heritage, but the idea of sessions really harkens back to this musical idea of producers and different kinds of musicians coming together to collaborate and produce a piece of music that's something new and innovative. And that's what we want to do with sessions. We want to bring leaders from different subsectors, really leaders with different and sometimes competing interests together around tables and in discussion to really start to shape a future for the industry that can take us further and can really help put patients at the center of the healthcare industry.
Such a great concept because, again, the Nashville Healthcare Council is not putting it all on.
Sure.
You're just really creating that ecosystem for everybody to join in and collaborate. And to your point, it is so Nashville.
It's so Nashville.
And I love that people have rallied around it. And what a success you all are seeing for just the second year.
Absolutely. I can talk a little bit about the stats of it to just back that up. I think one, in our first year, we had so much interest, which I was so grateful for, because when you're doing something new, sometimes people have to have a wait and see approach. I don't find this in the Nashville community. The leadership jumps in feet first and says, how can we help? And so we sort of got really lucky in year one that it was a great success. And in year two, our board was really clear. There were sort of three big things that they wanted us to prioritize in year two. One was getting the experience right. We wanted to build on the success of year one, but really elevate that experience. And by the time this podcast airs, we'll have already had the second year of sessions, but I think people will be really pleased with the elevation of that experience. The second thing was generating more buzz. We've really prioritized inviting media, encouraging our companies to make announcements. You're going to see a steady drumbeat of noise coming out of Nashville that week in the healthcare industry, with organizations sharing big news of all, big and small news coming out. We also got podcasts happening on site, lots of things to generate buzz. And then last, sort of the structure of the conference, this idea of sessions being a South by Southwest of healthcare, where our job at the council is to put a tent over the city and have lots of activity. So LBMC is a great partner in this. We have over 20 events happening outside of the conference walls throughout the week of sessions this year that are really bringing even more healthcare leaders, because we have a limited number of tickets to what's happening in the venue. And so there are even more opportunities for people to engage outside of the conference.
Well, and just to give another nod to this, it's public, it's private, it's nonprofit, it's governmental. So, you really are touching on all the different elements of truly bringing that really strong collaborative effort together.
Absolutely. And I think the other audience that's really important is the investor community. We've definitely prioritized making sure that this is a good use of investors' time. So you'll see on the guest list this year a really strong representation of investors, all the way from startup and venture into that private equity space, and bringing those leaders to Nashville to showcase the companies that are here and the companies that'll be part of sessions, but to really sort of build those relationships and showcase that. I think we have to be able to create an economic model in healthcare that works, and that investor community is an important part of that. The payer community is an important part of that. And certainly the provider community is an important part of that. And the innovation community, which sort of undergirds where we're going in the industry.
Absolutely. Very exciting time.
Very exciting.
Congrats. I know when this airs, you will be shining and talking about the success of the second year.
Well, let me also just say, I think it's important. We have over 1,200 people registered for the conference this year. So that's us busting at the seams in the venue that we're in and the Country Music Hall of Fame. So really excited to hit those numbers, second sellout. And that doesn't even capture all the other healthcare executives, leaders, investors, government officials that will be in town that week who maybe didn't snag a ticket to sessions, but they have an opportunity to participate in some of those associated events.
I love it. Love it. Yeah. Nashville taking the lead again to show, to help others. I love that collaboration. Well, Apryl, thank you. This has been delightful. We appreciate your time and best of luck at sessions.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, please follow, rate, review, and share Make It Count wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Learn more at lbmc.com/podcast.